Listen, life's all about leveling up. Whether you're handling business on the field or kicking it in your zone, you like to celebrate with cigars that match the moment. That's why you should link up with Famous Cigars to bring you a wild deal. Right now, you can grab 8 premium cigars for just $8. You heard that right. 8 top-rated cigars at $1 a stick. Top quality brands like Oliva, Romeo y Julieta, and Davidoff. Handpicked just for you and worth over $80. Hit up famouscigars.com/cam and lock in this exclusive deal. While you're there, check out their insane selection of premium cigars, all shipped fresh and fast from their massive 20,000 square foot humidor. That's half a football field. Famous Cigars has been in the game since 1939 and still family owned. So celebrate every win with the folks at Famous. 8 cigars for $8. famouscigars.com/cam.
The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. Sam, things are heating up in the NBA offseason. How you doing?
I think Kyrie Irving just saved the NBA offseason for the general media at large. I know for us, we had our own topics that we were ready to talk about regardless of what was happening over there in Brooklyn. But yeah, things are really heating up, man. Things are really heating up. Like as of maybe an hour ago.
Yeah.
Reports just started to explode. Yeah. So here we go. Buckle up.
Kyrie Irving might be the best ever at making the story about him and then being furious that the story is about him.
Exactly. Yep.
What a fascinating dichotomy Kyrie Irving is. Because, yeah, he definitely does both of those things. But it's made...
Absolutely despises the media. Mm-hmm. Often within reason, Well, but, yeah. There's points can be made on both sides. I will say that, but absolutely despises the media. And yet, before these reports came out, the media was going to have to cover this NBA offseason as if DeAndre Ayton choosing between Orlando and Detroit was the biggest storyline.
Yeah.
They are loving this. They are loving this. Yeah.
In some respects, the free agency class now could have Kyrie Irving. Bradley Beal is probably going to opt out. It seems like he's going to re-sign with Washington, but could be technically a free agent briefly at some point during this free agency period. And there's a lot of options, and the deadline. Things have to heat up a lot. Look, we have to start this episode talking about the possibility of Kevin Durant being traded to the Phoenix Suns because, we said it. It's been a month. We said it over a month ago, actually.
5 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that.
If there is a chance that Kevin Durant could be traded to the Phoenix Suns, the Suns have to do everything in their power to try and trade for him. And things are looking that way, that there is a chance that Kevin Durant could be traded. The problem is the speed at which everything is happening is a little bit slow for it to happen by the time free agency opens in just a few days. And what I mean by that is, right now, what we need is Kyrie Irving to probably opt out. That might be the best option. He can opt in and be traded as well. Opting out might be a better option for the Suns at this point. The deadline for him to make the decision on his player option is Wednesday. So for most of you listening to this, a day or two from now. Very soon. And once that happens, all reports are saying now that Kevin Durant has yet to speak to the front office since they lost and since they were swept in the first round of the NBA playoffs. He needs to talk to them because he needs to tell them that he wants to be traded to Phoenix. Then that's the only way the Suns have an option. Look, I think it's not completely out of the question that he could just avoid talking to them entirely and then just speak to them through the media, right? Make it very known that he only wants to play for one team. That is the Suns' best option, basically. the way that Kyrie Irving is currently playing the media, he gave them a list of teams. He gave them a list of teams where only one of those teams was interested in him, and that's the Los Angeles Lakers. And that is essentially Kyrie Irving saying, I want to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. So something like that needs to happen, and fast, for the Suns to be able to complete a trade for Kevin Durant that includes a sign-in trade. Because any option outside of a sign-in trade for Kevin Durant would likely require the Suns bringing Ayton back on a contract this year and trying to extend this saga until the trade deadline, while everyone will know that that's what they're doing, which is kind of a disaster for the season. But what do you think, Sam?
I mean, there are certainly a lot of other sign-and-trade candidates for DeAndre Ayton that we've talked about, and I'm sure, other teams will continue to have that interest. So we've got a whole list at this point, essentially. But no doubt, cream of the crop is Kevin Durant. Basically, every other option that we've kind of toyed with, some are more interesting than others when it comes to DeAndre Ayton sign-in trades, but it's kind of just trying to recoup as much value as you possibly can.
Yeah.
In a sense where you're trying to make it as less in a shitty situation as much as you possibly can, right? The difference with KD, it's like KD is the one player where it's like, oh my God, we can really have someone come in who could actually be the number one here. And who would give you an honest to God really good chance at an NBA championship next season, and you just feel really great pairing him next to Book. I mean, KD's talent speaks for itself. I don't think I have to convince anyone on the player that he is.
Yeah.
It's just insane that we're in a situation, because you were talking about Kyrie opting in versus opting out. Definitely, if Kyrie opts out, it would speed up the process versus opting in and having to find a trade, but Brooklyn not wanting to make that trade because the Lakers have objectively pretty terrible assets to give up in return. So on the one hand, the Suns should be rooting for the opt-out from Kyrie because it'll speed up the process. On the other hand, us being in a situation where all of this hinges on Kyrie being enough of a madman to surrender $30 million of salary to go play for the Los Angeles Lakers for a taxpayer's mid-level exception, which is about $6 million per season. It's an absurd concept. That might be what needs to happen.
He's an absurd dude.
In order to get all of the wheels turning so that Kyrie can go to LA and then KD comes to Phoenix.
What a division the Pacific Division would become at that point.
What a division. I mean, Kyrie with the Lakers, KD with the Suns, the defending champions in Golden State, healthy Kawhi and PG in the Clippers, who before all of this happened, by the way, like if you just ask me as of now with the rosters as they are right now, who's my favorite in the Western Conference next season, I would probably tell you the Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, I have to watch Kawhi Leonard play first and see how healthy he is, but like there is a strong level of faith that I have generally in how that team has constructed its roster.
Right.
But that changes with Kyrie and with the Lakers, and more specifically with KD with us. I think there's a really, really, really strong argument that the Suns become the favorite again. So what a shit show, man. Here we go. Here we go. Like I literally, so we knew beforehand that this was going to be a free agent preview.
Yeah.
We knew beforehand that the Suns obviously were going to be roughly capped out, that, they had a mid-level exception. And so both of us, I think, researched some candidates that they could target, like bench player types for the mid-level exception. We'll talk about those later. But kind of all of that just got swept away in this conversation because, yes, we've been talking about KD for a month and a half now. But now it feels a lot more real. Mikal Bridges is fucking with people on Twitter now. He just tweeted about 10 minutes ago eyeball emojis when someone asked that, or someone said that it's been nice knowing him in Phoenix, essentially. Someone
was joking. Which is kind of a dick move, by the way.
It's absolutely a dick move. I don't approve necessarily of tagging players when you do that, but Mikal saw it and he quote tweeted it just with the eyeball emojis, and maybe he knows something, or maybe probably a 90% chance that he's just screwing with the entire fan base and he's a goofball, and that's who Mikal Bridges is. But man, either way, they're playing with our emotions on all ends.
Well, and here's the truth of it too. I think some people probably who aren't following it as closely as we are might say this is just Suns fans being crazy, but no, it's not really that. At this point,
that's what they said a month ago, and they were wrong, and they're wrong still now.
Yeah. And at this point, we have had Bobby Marks on the Low Post, when asked about the best trade candidates for Kevin Durant, first mentioned the Phoenix Suns. We just this morning had Brian Windhorst, who essentially has broken all of the major trades for the Suns in the past, mention the Suns as one of the best options to trade for Kevin Durant. These are two of the biggest platforms that exist when it comes to basketball, whether Brian Windhorst be speaking on TV on ESPN or the largest basketball podcast that exists in the Low Post, Bobby Marks, a former general manager, mentioning it. It's not just us at this point. Yes, we've been talking about it for a month and a half, but things are heating up, and the Suns are being mentioned regularly as this option. And we know why. Kevin Durant is close to Devin Booker. Kevin Durant is friends with Chris Paul. Kevin Durant loves Monty Williams, and Kevin Durant has said that one of the most underrated places to be in the NBA is the Phoenix Scottsdale area. There's a lot that connects him to here, and honestly, the trade package going back could be great, which we will mention what that could be in just a second. But also, it would give him a proper chance to compete, being that he only has 4 years left on his contract, which honestly might be the last contract that he has. He's 34, and there's 4 years left.
Yep, it just makes too much sense on all accounts. We connected the dots a long time ago. We mentioned all of the connections. Yes, it has always been, like, to some extent, a conspiracy theory that required a lot of dominoes to fall into place. But here we are. Those dominoes are starting to fall into place.
Yeah.
And it's, it's just very logical. If you follow all of the things, yes, a lot of things have to happen
soon,
but there are a lot of reasons why KD would want to be in Phoenix. It's one of his best opportunities out of all these teams he could possibly be traded to if he decides that he is officially done with Brooklyn. It is one of his best opportunities to win a ring. It is one of the best opportunities to give Brooklyn a return that they are satisfied with, where they don't get fleeced. So it makes too much sense for these insiders not to be bringing it up as kind of an obvious choice.
And for those who don't know or maybe didn't listen to our initial episode where we broke down how this could be possible, the most sensible and easiest option is a sign and trade DeAndre Ayton on a max to the Brooklyn Nets along with Mikal Bridges, and that's basically it. You could just essentially build a trade around that. Kevin Durant coming back, those two players going to the Brooklyn Nets, and it's essentially done at that point.
Plus picks and pick swaps for the next 30 years or whatever.
Whatever it takes at that point, I think, right? Whatever it takes. Yeah. It's I mean, Kevin Durant we can have this conversation later, but Kevin Durant could essentially become the best player that's ever played for the Phoenix Suns at that point. You just kind of do what you need to do. But yes, there are options. Everyone's probably thinking it. Is there an option without Mikal Bridges in the trade? Yes, you could potentially do it with DeAndre Ayton going there. Cameron Johnson would be the other prize because you need two, right?
Salary,
and then a bunch of salary. Dario Saric, Jay Crowder, essentially, because Mikal Bridges, his extension kicks in soon, and that extension is over $20 million, and you need that $20 million to count in order to have enough room to bring Kevin Durant back. So it just becomes a lot more complicated once you take Mikal Bridges out of the equation. And I'll say it now, if James Jones can pull off a Kevin Durant trade, it's incredible. If he can do it without Mikal Bridges somehow, that's a miracle. That would be like one of the best moves of all time, essentially, at that point. And it would be, I mean, it's what you would want, of course. Because
he never needs to draft a single player ever,
and he wouldn't be able
to. we also forget, Mike, the draft happened this week.
Yeah,
and normally, if we had a normal GM like 29 other teams. We would have given you guys an instant draft reaction episode. We did a playback stream. Thank you, as always, to everyone who was in there. It was a lot of fun, but we lasted over 4 hours on that stream, and the Suns did nothing. And we were just kind of hanging out in there thinking at some point, well, maybe they'll buy into the second round. Maybe they'll buy into the second round. And, we should know better by now. James Jones just has no interest in the draft. But if you deliver me Kevin Durant without trading Mikal Bridges somehow, I don't care.
Oh, yes,
that's fine.
Exactly. I mean, that would make him one of the best general managers in the NBA, if not the best. And really, what needs to be done is tampering. Essentially, they need to figure out a way for everyone to force this to happen. Kevin Durant, James Jones, everyone has to be on the same page in order for this to work. And look, I mean, James Harden did this twice last year. It happened twice. He forced his way to Brooklyn and then forced his way to Philadelphia. It's not out of the question that big name stars can find their own way to force themselves to the team that they want to go to well under contract. It's definitely possible. I think it becomes a little harder when you have 4 years on your contract like Kevin Durant and the Nets can just stare him down and say, no, we're not going to do anything and see what you do. But I don't know that would be good for them. Maybe their leverage is peaking now. And
it's really helpful the fact that these reports are coming out right now saying actually the Nets are willing to play ball, because a lot of teams in their position would not. But at least from what Windhorst is saying, it sounds like they would rather just blow it all up and not continue to kid themselves over the next 2 or 3 years and try and build a contender around Kevin Durant when they just wouldn't have the pieces.
Yep. And look, all of the Suns' plans right now hinge on what happens with DeAndre Ayton, essentially. And that includes Kevin Durant. And let's just quickly mention with DeAndre Ayton, we've talked about a bunch of suitors for him. Portland, which is they're essentially out of it. They can't really create the cap space. Atlanta was one that Jake Fisher kept mentioning. Atlanta has made it known, according to reports, that they're not interested in DeAndre Ayton unless it's less than a max, which he wants a max.
Can Detroit, I say quickly about that one?
Mm-hmm.
That feels weird, right? Like, doesn't that feel like that could be a smokescreen? Because that either feels to me... Well, what do you think about that? That either feels to me like a smokescreen or idiocy. Because the entire premise of the DeAndre Ayton discussion this whole time with Phoenix has been the purpose for the rift between DeAndre Ayton and the Suns is that the Suns were not willing to offer the max contract. So if you weren't willing to offer the max contract, why would you ever insert yourself into the conversation in the first place? It just feels a little weird.
Well, I think the tea leaves are just pointing to the possibility of DeAndre Ayton not getting a max offer.
Yeah.
And if you can get in on DeAndre Ayton at less than a max, then I don't know, maybe you should try to do that. You know, if you're Atlanta, because Detroit, who was his best option, traded for a young center. And even if DeAndre Ayton were to sign there, he would now have a young center behind him who they traded for in the draft and drafted pretty high. One of the highest picked centers in the NBA draft in Jalen Duren. So, it would be interesting to see what would happen there if that were to happen, or if that's something that they're just out on him at this point, which, by the way, there have been reports that they are out on him. You know, obviously, a lot of the reports change. And look, it wouldn't be completely insane for them to draft a center and then still sign DeAndre Ayton. It's still possible. But the fact that it's looking less likely just means that some of his leverage is now drying up. The best option for him at this point is the San Antonio Spurs, the only team that has the cap space to offer him a max contract right now without any signing trades. They probably still would negotiate a sign and trade so that they could, one, clear their starting center that they have now off of the roster if they're signing DeAndre Ayton and Jakob Poeltl, and they have the ability to ensure that the Suns don't match if they negotiate a sign and trade. And then outside of that, you have like Indiana and Orlando who don't quite have the cap space, who could probably create it. And Orlando apparently has said that they would have the most cap space next year if they kind of stand pat, and they want to do that, which we've talked about it in the past in our Cameron Johnson episode. Next year's free agency class is much better than this year's, and that could be a better year to have cap space. And look, all of this is to say that a less than a max offer for DeAndre Ayton might be on the table here, and maybe not, because a lot of these teams, including teams that have no cap space, could potentially negotiate a signing trade that allows them to sign him at a max.
Mm-hmm.
But it's become clear that the Suns' leverage for a signing trade, in my opinion, is pretty high at this point.
Well, before we get into all the sign and trade options, because I know we have them listed out here, I think it poses an interesting question that we've never really brought up before. Just final point on the KD thing, and then we'll move on it. We'll move on from it for good.
Well,
for this episode,
we'll see,
right?
Because we have to talk about options if he is signed, or if he is traded for.
Fair,
I mean,
fair. Yeah. We might just mention Kevin Durant's name a lot in this episode. Sorry, guys.
It's gonna happen.
Indulge in it. I know one option, for instance, our friend David has brought up a lot with DeAndre Ayton is like, well, what if you could get him on a flat contract? Just hypothetically, if you got him for slightly less than a normal max contract, which I believe would be 5 years, $177. Can you correct me if I'm wrong? I always forget what the exact figure is. I think it's around there. Yeah. What if you could get him on a flat $30 million a year, 5/150? Would you rather, because obviously the KD thing is conditional on the Ayton trade, would you rather just keep DeAndre Ayton for 5/150 and then try and get something else and upgrade at a different position, or would you rather have Kevin Durant?
I'd rather have Kevin Durant, first of all.
Yeah, me too. I mean, no question. I wanted to throw it out there in a non-leading way, just to see what you said.
Here's where I stand on DeAndre Ayton. I am over 90% certain that he is not part of the long-term future of the Phoenix Suns. I am probably 75 to 80% certain that he will not be on the Suns next year. And those are two different numbers for me. And what I mean by that is the Suns could still match whatever he's offered, and they could really let it ride out like they did with Kelly Oubre once the cap space started drying up, and just let him continue to try to get something to try and get the lowest contract possible. But even if they sign him, I'd be shocked if DeAndre Ayton were part of the long-term future of the Suns. I still think that he would likely be in trade talks in this coming year. So I think that that's kind of where I am. And I think part of that is because I think that if his options run out, which they appear to be, he could sign at less than a max, and the Suns could just match that and get him at less than a max contract, which is a good player on less than a max contract for the Phoenix Suns now. If he continues to be unhappy or things don't work out the way they want it to work out while he's on the Suns, he can easily be traded. I just don't think that they're clearly not committed to him in a long-term way based on everything that we've heard about him at this point. So, I don't know if they're looking at it as it's better to have a trade asset that's $30 million than trade him now for $15 million, basically, in whatever you get back. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the interesting part of the conversation, and I think that leads us to the potential actual sign and trade options, which I made a list of, and feel free to correct me if I'm missing some. And some are, I want to say it right now, some are more realistic than others. But this is all the names that we've talked about recently. Kevin Durant, obviously.
They're all established names, like, who have been out there. Not necessarily directly connected to Phoenix, but teams that make sense for a DeAndre Ayton partnership, and also players whose names have been rumored. So I don't think it's a logical leap for any of these guys. But anyway, go ahead.
Kevin Durant, OG Anunoby, Miles Turner on a 1-year contract, I should mention. Wendell Carter Jr., DeJounte Murray, which is a new name because DeJounte Murray has now showed up in potential trade talks from the Spurs, and I think that it's unlikely, for the record, that the Spurs would trade DeJounte Murray for the ability to sign DeAndre Ayton, but I think it's a name that we just have to list here just in case, because that would be great for the Suns. John Collins, who, by the way, DeJounte Murray and John Collins may be traded for each other soon, according to some reports. Isaiah Stewart, who's the center from Detroit, if Detroit's still in. And then a package that I'm calling Poeltl Plus, which is Jakob Poeltl plus
Sounds
something.
like an advanced stat.
Yeah.
From some new advanced stat.
So Poeltl plus a young player. Because I do think the
Poeltl
Spurs...
plus is off the charts, man. You gotta...
Poeltl plus, his Poeltl minus is not great, though. So Poeltl plus a young player or like a trade exception. By the way, there is always a possibility of the Suns getting a trade exception back and then using that later to try and trade for a player with a larger contract, which is something the Suns could do. And I wouldn't be surprised about that. Kevin Durant's obviously number one on this list, right? We can just start there.
Well, just to be clear, maybe, again, for people who haven't necessarily followed all of the rumors as closely over the last several weeks, like, how we arrived at these names is, other than Kevin Durant, where we've already explained you'd have to trade probably Mikal Bridges, maybe other stuff. Every other name here has to fall under we talked about it again, like, when we first discussed all of the Ayton options, like a month and a half ago, fall under the $19 million a year salary threshold next season. That would make the salaries fit nicely on both sides according to what the sign and trade rules of the CBA are. So it's not necessarily here's the best player
right.
on each of these rosters, or here's the most attractive asset, but it's like here's the most attractive.
These.
Yeah, like you could maybe do these. Here's the most attractive asset under a certain threshold, who maybe could be actually had, or who maybe would fit a certain positional need for Phoenix, in the event that you no longer have DeAndre Ayton as your starting center. So that's kind of how we got to these. I think actually John Collins is the only one. He makes more than $19 million, but barely.
Who's the second best player on this list?
It's DeJounte Murray.
It has to be, right?
It's not close.
Yeah.
It's not close.
And that's a fascinating one because DeJounte Murray
that's a really cool name.
He plays the same position essentially as the Suns' two best players, which is like this combo guard, point guard, shooting guard role. He's a point guard, really, but like he has the size to play shooting guard. He can play next to a point guard, and it wouldn't be a problem. The best at creating his own shot, an excellent defender, has size at the point guard position, and would be a really excellent player next to Devin Booker long term in a post Chris Paul future. Starting the three guards of Chris Paul, DeJounte Murray, Devin Booker would be fascinating. I'll say that. Defensively, it would be an interesting challenge, but the Suns would constantly have two great offensive players on the court at all times in those guys. None of them great 3-point shooters, by the way, which is kind of a funny thing. But if you surround them with the right shooting, it'd be pretty fascinating. In that case, Mikal Bridges, I guess, would play power forward in the starting lineup, and then what do you do? It's just such a small version of the team. But it's like DeJounte Murray is available right now, and the Suns potentially have the assets to go get him, depending on what else they'd be willing to give along with DeAndre Ayton if the Spurs are even interested. And like, I don't know, it's tough to be out on that. Like, could the Suns win a championship next year with him? Maybe not. Like, maybe that's not the best team for that. But does that set up a post Chris Paul future for Devin Booker in a way that they're not desperate to do because they're doing it a little early? Yeah, maybe it does do that.
I think it would be hard to trick yourself into believing that DeJounte Murray on the Suns next year and presumably like just take like a massive downgrade from DeAndre Ayton at center. Like, let's just assume we get, I don't know, some random guy with the mid-level exception. Such a guard-centric team. I mean, your penetration, your playmaking, there would be so many aspects of that team that would just continue to be phenomenal. But counting on that many guys who are 6'4", 6'3", in Chris Paul's case, 6'1", in the playoffs, and then just a bunch of role players, it would be a fairly unprecedented challenge for the Suns to try and have to overcome. The fit, admittedly, is not perfect, but in a post-Chris Paul era, we have talked about for a while that the Suns have absolutely no idea what they're going to do to pair someone next to Devin Booker in the post-Chris Paul era, whenever that eventually comes. Who would be more perfect than a guy like DeJounte Murray, who is an established, he's a 25-year-old all-star. Fits the timeline, really great defender, 6'10" wingspan, doesn't present the same size issues potentially at the point guard position that a guy like Chris Paul does. Yeah. Not the playmaker that Chris Paul is, but still one of the best playmakers in the NBA.
Yeah,
and in a sense,
his own shot. The combo of Murray and Booker is more similar to the way a lot of teams play. Like Chris Paul is more from a different era. The combination of Murray and Booker is kind of the way teams play now. They have like two guys that are maybe neither of them are point gods, but you could easily build an offense around both of those guys and their ability to penetrate, just like you said.
And again, if you keep Mikal Bridges and this, you don't get Kevin Durant, but okay, that means you also don't trade Mikal Bridges, so you can believe in a future of DeJounte Murray, Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, hopefully Cam Johnson as well. Like
sounds like really fun team.
It's a core. It's a core to believe in. The question is just how do you get quite over the hump? Can someone take a leap? Can one of the big wings make specifically a creation leap that helps facilitate getting into the deeper rounds of the playoffs and really succeeding in a way that a lot of these small guard-centric teams in recent years have not been able to do? Now, granted, I say that the Golden State Warriors are a small guard-centric team that just won a championship several weeks ago, but you also understand there are some critical differences in the way that what you can count on Chris Paul to do at this stage in his career versus what you could count on Steph Curry to do, and there are some other differences too. It would be tough. You could talk yourself into it, though. I think of everyone on that list, DeJounte Murray, clear number 2.
Who's the third best player?
That's a really good question.
Is it OG Anunoby? Kind of feel like it might be OG Anunoby. Because otherwise it would be John Collins, right?
It would be John Collins. John Collins in a vacuum, I think, is the more talented player. But, well, I don't know, man. John Collins paired with Chris Paul is pretty interesting.
Yeah,
but
you're right.
Who's a better playoff fit? It's probably OG Anunoby.
Yeah, because OG Anunoby, he shoots a ton of threes. He's a good 3-point shooter. Not great at creating his own shot, but he's a defender that would fit right into what the Suns are missing. I mean, ultimately, he's like a better defender than Jay Crowder, stronger, younger, and has a higher offensive upside. It's those two players I say are like John Collins is a better offensive player probably. I mean, he can create his own shot. He can do a lot of things with the ball. Not like a lot, I should say. Like both of these guys are not guys you could build your offense around. They have to be your third, fourth, fifth best offensive player in order to be a contender. But I'll say that I like OG more than John Collins. If the Suns there was a situation where the Suns apparently would trade for OG Anunoby, I would be happier with that than John Collins, while admitting that maybe John Collins is the better player. Maybe I'd be wrong about that.
I feel the same way. I have some concerns about John Collins.
And then you got other guys.
Just with fit.
Miles Turner.
Then you went to the tier of other guys.
Yeah.
Which is really what these are.
I think Jakob Poeltl might be the best of those.
Jakob Poeltl is a downgrade from Ayton, but we've talked about in the past, like if you could pair Poeltl and Vassell or Poeltl and Keldon Johnson somehow, you can come away with that.
The Suns apparently like Sohan.
Maybe Sohan. You can come away with that and trick yourself into that being a good deal.
Yeah.
Isaiah Stewart, we only listed because he's young, he fits the need of a center, and he's maybe the only piece or the most attractive piece that Detroit could offer now that they've traded Jeremy Grant. Because before, I think we would have said Jeremy Grant plus whatever. Now, I think Isaiah Stewart would be the most likely. I think this is by far the worst option. It's like the disaster scenario. But hopefully the reports are true that Detroit isn't even interested enough to make a push for this in the first place.
Yeah. By the way, apparently Woj on TV just said that Kevin Durant won't have a lot of say in what team he gets traded for. So, I don't know. Hopefully he's wrong about that. 4 years on the contract complicates everything. It really does.
Well, I don't know, man, because maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe he won't get a lot of say, but I think the Suns could still build.
Yeah.
Who are they competing against exactly?
Right. Well, it depends on what you'd be willing to give up.
You're looking to balance rebuilding while still staying on a competitive timeline and not. I don't think the Nets are going for.
What about Paul George? Or Jaylen Brown. What if those guys are on the table for Kevin Durant?
Why would the Clippers give up Paul George and piece? I mean, I guess it's Kevin Durant, but
it's Kevin Durant.
That feels kind of lateral-ish, right?
It's not.
It doesn't make much sense.
It's a better player.
Paul George is really fucking good, man. But the Celtics with Jaylen Brown, I mean that's a little more interesting. But it's just if the Nets aren't interested in trying to maintain a relationship with Kevin Durant and compete for the next couple of years, they're not going to be interested in doing the same thing with Jaylen Brown. I understand Jaylen Brown is 7 years younger, but what are you going to do with Jaylen Brown and a bunch of kids theoretically for the next few years?
What about Bam Adebayo or some Tyler Hero type package?
Bam is interesting. I mean, a lot of trade packages are going to come up, but the Suns of Ayton and Bridges, two controllable young players who are both around 23, 24 years old, who already have finals experience and can also continue to get better. I'm not saying that there aren't hypothetically better packages out there. It's just the Suns would be competitive with this them.
Yeah. Sorry to go right back to that, but
no, it's all right.
I just saw that
the
posted,
frenzy, the circus has begun. This is our lives for the next week. So here we go.
So the first thing that needs to get figured out is Ayton. Once that's figured out, then we can talk about free agency. Let's actually take a quick break and let's break down some of the options for free agency after that gets figured out. So we'll be right back. Okay, free agency. Now, the Suns can sign DeAndre Ayton. I just want to reiterate that. And there is a possibility where the Suns end up just re-signing DeAndre Ayton. He's on the team. And then they can look to upgrade the roster other ways by trading other guys. They can run it back and try to upgrade the roster at the deadline. I doubt that they're going to end the season next year with the same team if they end up signing DeAndre Ayton. But that's step one. They can do that. So let's just lay that on the table. That's there. I think the situation, as far as how happy I personally would be if they did that, has a lot of contingencies for me. I need to understand the relationship between him and the team before I would give any impression on how I'd feel about that. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that before we move on to other stuff, Sam?
No, not particularly. I guess that I would just agree. It's going to be difficult to parse through everything that's going on in a rapidly changing landscape in the first week of free agency. And so I think, like, even with the draft, in a vacuum, I hate the fact that the Suns, sorry to bring it up for a second time this episode, but it's like it did just happen. So yeah. I went on a whole rant for our patrons in our exclusive episode right after that happened. Maybe it was right before, actually. In a vacuum, I hate the fact that they didn't take anyone at all. In the grand scheme of things, I could be talked into it being genius based on, you getting the right player to suddenly improve. But if a few weeks from now we end up with a clear downgrade from DeAndre Ayton at center, no Kevin Durant or other star player coming to Phoenix, and also no young talent coming in to help sort of replenish the bench a little bit, well, that's like a disaster scenario that exists. It is a possibility for the Phoenix Suns as an outcome this offseason. It would just be the worst one. So we've got a wide array of possibilities here, and I will try, I guess, and I guess I would encourage other people to try not to overreact. This is probably sounds a little bit rich coming from me, not to overreact too much at the beginning of the process until we really understand what's going on. But yeah, that being said, if the Suns go out on day one and they sign Carmelo Anthony and Rajon Rondo, I'll also have to kill myself. So we'll see.
It is a funny world where, like, we have a possibility of recording a podcast in the next week about Kevin Durant coming to the Suns, recording a podcast in the next week about Robert Sarver being forced to sell the team, or just like recording a podcast to talk about how the Suns signed like Serge Ibaka.
Yeah, it's a little scary, not gonna lie, dude, because that's definitely, it's in the back of my mind. It's like I hope I've been joking that there's a 99% chance KD comes to the Suns or whatever, but
a lot
that other possibility exists.
I just want to keep mentioning that, like, even if Kevin Durant wants to come to the Suns, so much would need to happen in order for him to end up here. A lot needs to go right, and that's why, as much fun as we have had, you and I, talking about this and joking about how things are pointing the right direction, it's just, a lot needs to go right. I guess that's all I need to say about that. But let's talk about what the Suns have. If DeAndre Ayton is signed, if he's not signed, if he's traded in the sign and trade package, whatever it ends up being, the Suns will likely be a tax-paying team next season, and that means that they basically have no cap space. And so they have some potential exceptions that they could use. They have the tax-paying mid-level exception, which is starts at $6.4 million, and they could sign a player for multiple seasons. And they have the potential of using their biannual exception, which is something they have not used. And something we mention every year, and they never use. And if they use it this year, they become hard capped because they are. They're probably not going to use it this year. Let's just say that, right?
I'm not expecting it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then they have minimums because they're a tax team. They don't have the full MLE. They don't have like room exceptions and things like that. They just have the smaller tax-paying mid-level exception, which apparently is enough to get Kyrie Irving, but we'll leave that.
Yep.
And so that means that there's like they have the ability of maybe signing one player that could make a difference next year, essentially, right?
Yep. Just to clarify the difference, like the normal MLE that teams who are not tax-paying teams have access to is you could go up to 4 years on the contract, and it's more like $9.5-10 million per year.
It's $10.48 million next year.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't account for the fact that it went up again with the inflation. I guess inflation affects everything. That's like it's a notable difference, I think. Between there are certain players who are definitely ring chasers and just want the opportunity to go play for a contender, but the difference between a 4-year contract worth around $42-ish million versus a 3-year contract worth $20 million, which is more like what the Suns can offer.
Yeah,
there's definitely a difference there, and the Suns are not the only team in that group. There are a lot of tax-paying teams that only have access to the smaller version of the mid-level exception. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely a smaller pool. Just for kind of referential sake, I wrote out a list of guys who are currently making, not necessarily who signed exactly this type of contract, but who, for whatever reason, are currently making about $6 to $7 million. Mm-hmm. Are you interested in the names? real quick, just so we get
Sure.
an idea.
Yeah.
You've got Cameron Payne, of course, who the Suns
That's
signed
right.
to an extension last year. PJ Tucker, Kem Birch, movie star Juancho Hernangomez, Justin Holiday, Rudy Gay, Dennis Schroeder, Patty Mills. Just to give you an idea, like, you know, we're talking about, in my opinion, not a huge game changer unless you get really, really lucky with just absolutely nailing the value aspect of this acquisition. But we are talking about a guy, I mean, in most of these cases, you know, in bad cases, these are guys like Cameron Payne who fall off entirely and can't contribute in a playoff
Right.
series. But
or they're older and might be done.
Or they're older.
Yeah, you're taking a risk.
But in good scenarios, these are guys who are like eighth men and can play 10 or 15 minutes in a playoff rotation and, you know, can be counted on. So they're not difference makers exactly, but they maybe swing a couple games over the course of the regular season, and they do make some of a difference. So.
And here's where the
That's what we're dealing
conversation
with.
gets complicated. We don't know if the Suns are going to have a starting center next year. And if the Suns don't have that starting center, we don't know what they're trading him for. Maybe they're trading DeAndre Ayton for another center, and they do have a starting center. Maybe they're trading him for a forward or a guard. Now they have to replace the starting center. And look, not a lot of cap space to get. Like, I would say if you have high expectations for free agency, lower them at this point. And just understand the best way for the Suns to improve their roster next year is by making trades. That's really their only option to dramatically impact this roster. The names we're going to talk about are interesting names, and they could improve the team slightly, or they could at least be some sort of stopgap so that losing DeAndre Ayton is not a horrible situation for the Suns. But, like, none of them are stars, so we'll just start there.
They're more JaVale McGee-esque, you know? Like,
Yeah.
JaVale
That's
made
what he
an
made,
impact.
$5 million, right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. That's kind of, again, in line with what we're talking about here. And to be honest, I think there are a couple of names here where if you landed them in the right system with the right kind of faith and resources being pumped into them, I have a couple ideas for guys who I think could absolutely crush it on a contract of this value and could, like, just play super, super well and be a lot more impactful than a player like JaVale McGee. Or you could go with some known product, 33-year-old veteran where you know exactly what you're going to get, and it would just be like JaVale McGee-esque. So we'll see what they do.
All right, let's talk centers, because you and I kind of just split this up between centers, so bigs, wings, and guards, right? Talk about guys that, because we don't know exactly what the Suns' biggest need is going to be. I want to reiterate the tax-paying mid-level, $6.4 million. They could do multiple years with that. And then the possibility of the biannual exception. I think it's unlikely, but there is a possibility of essentially signing two of these players if they're willing to be hard capped, which makes it hard to improve the team in the middle of the year, for the record. So that means I think it's unlikely, unless they're really confident. Like, I think it's more likely if you trade for Kevin Durant that you could use the biannual exception and just be willing to be hard capped after that for a season than if you brought Ayton back or something like that. Okay, so I have some names, and all of them appear to be more expensive than I would think. Having said that, if Kevin Durant is on the Suns, if Kevin Durant is on the Suns, there is the possibility of a player taking less money to play with Chris Paul, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker. Let's see.
For instance, Kyrie Irving. No.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm fucking around.
I mean, add it to my guard list. I'll just read some names, more than one here. There's Kevon Looney, we saw Kevon Looney. He's a good player and is a champion.
Championship pedigree of the highest degree.
And probably not going to make a ton of money, right? I think he probably could go for a little bit more than the tax-paying mid-level exception. Maybe he could fit into someone's regular MLE. But it's probably unlikely he's going to get more than the MLE, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's at the end of the day, Looney played a hell of a finals, like did exactly what Golden State needed him to do, but he's not a particularly skilled big.
Yeah.
He's
incredibly limited, and that works.
He made
within their
a
system.
couple of awkward mid-range floaters, I guess, in that series against Boston that maybe if you squint hard enough, you're like, But no, he's not really a skilled big. So yeah, I think an MLE for a guy like Kevon Looney.
Was he on your list?
He's not my favorite option, but he's absolutely on the list of like known quantities. I mean, we literally just saw a team win a championship with Kevon Looney as its starting center. Yeah. We know exactly what Kevon Looney can give you. So yeah, he's on the list.
Okay, and then I have Serge Ibaka, which I know I just made a joke about, but is a potential player that could play center and shoot threes and guard the rim. Older. So you'd be ultimately taking a risk on a player that may not, first of all, make it to the playoffs and may not be good anymore. So we'll see. But he's on the list because I think there's a potential for him. And then I have some other names that I think I'll hold off on. Who do you have as potential centers that the Suns could sign in free agency?
Real quick, I'll throw out Zubats has a $7.5 million team option through the Clippers. I would expect them to pick that up. Yeah. I think he is significantly better than that, but I throw him on my list just because. Speaking of the Clippers, though, by far my favorite option here is Isaiah Hartenstein, who I think is a guy that NBA hipsters have liked for a little while, but I think maybe the mainstream NBA community has not quite caught up on yet, and is basically, I mean, do you have any preconceived notions on this guy before I go further? Was he on your list at all?
Well, I'll be honest. I knew he was going to be on your list, so I left him off mine.
That's fair.
I let you have the opportunity to talk about him. I like him a lot. I like him a lot, for the record. I think he's actually more versatile than people realize.
Absolutely.
And I think he's very high energy, which is something the Suns could use.
Look, at the end of the day, if you're talking about getting plus value, it's exactly what I was just talking about. A contract worth $6 million, how are you going to get plus value outside of praying, again, that like a Kyrie Irving type player decides to do this historic level of ring chasing that we haven't seen before, which is probably not going to happen. How do you get plus value on a $6 million contract? You could just go for the known quantity, the veteran players, the Serge Ibakas, the Kevon Looney's, or you could take a swing at a young guy who you really believe in your system could look a lot better. And Hartenstein is still only 23. He's already played for 4 teams in his young career, which some people might see as a black mark. And the other critical thing here that I definitely think James Jones would take into account, because I think it matters a lot to him, is no playoff experience. He has not played a role on any playoff teams throughout his career.
Yeah.
But all that being said, he's taken on slightly larger roles in the regular season, season after season, going from a guy who was like basically, when he was on Houston, was on primarily third string kind of duty and would just come in sometimes and play like 10 minutes per game. This season, he got up to 15 minutes per game, still in a complete bench role, but a career high. And all of his rate statistics, his per minute statistics, his per possession statistics, and his advanced statistics are fantastic. He averaged 17 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists per 36 minutes on 66% true shooting. He started to space the floor for the first time in his career, not to a huge extent in terms of volume, but he shot 14 for 30 overall on threes. So for the first time, he started to demonstrate that he could bring it out to the three-point line and make those shots.
Numbers, right?
a little better than DeAndre, and especially given the number of minutes that he was able to make 14 shots in only 14 minutes per game.
Much higher rate.
Yeah. He held opponents to only 52.5% shooting within 6 feet of the basket, which demonstrates heavy presence as a rim protector. That's about 10% lower than league average. League average in that range is around 62%. For reference, DeAndre Ayton was at 58% this season. Ayton is consistently, as you would expect for a guy who's maybe demanding a max contract. Ayton falls consistently above average as a rim protector or below average from that 62% mark. But Hartenstein was better last season, just in terms of that one stat.
Right.
He was, or the Clippers were 10 points better in terms of net rating when he was on the floor this season compared to when he was off. He hit 61% of his floaters on 82 attempts, which is more floater attempts than a guy like Richaun Holmes attempted last season. And remember, we've talked about Richaun Holmes with this for a few years now, just like the way that he has developed his push shot. So yeah, I mean, you basically look all around. I mean, I think a lot of people at this point would be saying, well, what's the catch? Why is this a guy who would only be making $6 million? If it doesn't sound like he has an obvious weakness, again, it's inexperience. It's the fact that he's never actually really started for any team in the NBA, let alone played a role in a playoff setting. And there maybe would be some concerns about, well, okay, he can definitely protect the rim. I think he can actually be, according to B-Ball Index at least, he's an above average, versatile guy for his position as well, who can play in multiple contexts.
Yeah.
Great passer. But there would still be questions about is this the type of guy who eventually gets played off the floor? He's a big.
Is he durable enough to start as well?
Right.
Because there's no evidence of it yet.
7-footer. We're talking about closer to 250, 255 pounds. Maybe the type of guy who eventually gets played off the floor in the playoffs. You don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
but
he can stick with
you can sign a guy at the taxpayer mid-level that gets played off the floor. That's fine.
Right.
That's kind of that's what it's for. You're not going
to compared to a guy like JaVale McGee, I guess I would just stress the point. Like JaVale McGee came in, did his job for $5 million. I have no qualms with what JaVale McGee was for the Suns last season, but he came in and he caught lobs. And
he's not going to get better.
He caught lobs and he kind of protected the rim, and that was it.
Yeah.
This is a guy, he can protect the rim. Increasingly, he can space the floor. He's not afraid to dribble a little bit to get to his floater. Like, he's got a little bit of skill.
Yeah.
He's got a plus. He's got a plus assist to turnover ratio, like Frank Kaminsky-esque. So he can play that kind of connector role. If there's any type of guy you'd want to gamble on here and say, hey, maybe that guy can actually be a pretty damn good starting center, particularly in Monty Williams' system that likes to reward bigs who can pass the ball.
And screen, yeah.
I'm not saying Hartenstein would become Nikola Jokic, but he would have opportunities in Phoenix that he didn't have in LA. And to me, like, in the event that DeAndre Ayton leaves, in the event that Kevin Durant comes, and now you just need a guy like a placeholder to be your starting center, this would be a match made in heaven for me. This would be a name to look out for.
I totally agree. In fact, I would go as far as saying that if whatever team ends up getting Hartenstein, if they end up getting him on the taxpayer mid-level exception, that'll be one of the best value contracts signed. Or at least there is a good chance that that'll be one of the best value contracts signed in free agency if a team is able to do that. Because I just think he showed a lot on a team that was trying really hard to continue to win without its star players. And I agree. So he arguably would have a smaller role than he did on the Clippers last year on the Suns. And I think he could do a really good job when paired with Chris Paul and Devin Booker. So I think that's a great one. And I would venture to say that it's probably the best realistic signing, because I think Kevon Looney could probably sign for more than the taxpayer mid-level exception. And even Serge Ibaka might even be a minimum player at this point. I'm not exactly sure. And then you have guys like Mitchell Robinson that's probably going to sign bigger contracts. And then like Boucher, for example, from Toronto, I like a lot, and I think would be good in the Sun system. Some will say forward or center, whatever you want to say about him. But I think he's kind of priced out of the Suns' range as well, right?
I think he is. I just want to say on Mitch Robinson real quick, like he's very much more of the JaVale McGee mold. Like he's not a skilled center. He's just going to catch lobs and block shots. But you know what? If you could get a guy like Mitch Robinson to agree to do that for $6 million a year, that's also a great value.
You do a great job there, especially if he's a starting center. I think he's young enough to improve.
Yeah, well, I think Knicks fans have gotten a little frustrated with Mitch Robinson over the years because they've had him for 4 years, and to be honest, he hasn't improved.
Well, they don't have a point guard. They've literally been playing without a point guard.
Right. At the end of the day, you've got a guy who posted a 72% true shooting last year with Alec Burks as the starting point guard. Yeah. There's a case to be made there that I don't think he's going to start crossing anyone over and hitting threes, but give him Chris Paul and he would look fine in the offense, and his rim protection speaks for itself. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense too if you could somehow convince him.
If the Suns were to land Kevin Durant, here's two names that I would say should be on the radar. PJ Tucker. I know he's a forward/center, but I put him on my bigs list here because he's basically a big at this point. And I think if you have Kevin Durant, you're playing a small ball 5 with him because Kevin Durant is the 7-footer. PJ Tucker could be the guy guarding other guys and getting rebounds. And I think he's probably going to sign for the taxpayer mid-level exception somewhere. I think that's a likely scenario, and I think he wants a ring. And by the way, just the storyline of him being the guy who was mentoring Devin Booker when Devin Booker was a rookie, coming back to the team if Kevin Durant joined, would just be a great story. I love PJ Tucker. So just throwing his name out there. And another one is LaMarcus Aldridge, who is a potential free agent here if the Suns end up with Kevin Durant as well. And obviously we know Aldridge. These are the difference in names when you have ring chasers, because you have a top 5 player. Aldridge could be a center in that scenario.
I don't like that much, but you're reminding me of something. Did James Jones ever play with LaMarcus Aldridge? That feels like someone he might have played with.
Probably.
At some point in his
career.
Did he play? Did they play together in Portland? Didn't James Jones play in Portland for like a year? Was LaMarcus Aldridge already in the NBA?
Yeah, that could be it. right?
Let me see.
Do you have basketball reference up? But yeah,
yeah.
I think
So James Jones played in Portland in 2007, 2008, and LaMarcus Aldridge was a sophomore.
There you go.
So they have an established relationship. That's funny. I've never thought about that before.
Yeah,
but yeah,
so
maybe.
I'm
not like stoked about that, but yeah, it could happen. I mean, he certainly loves long twos. That fits into the Suns culture.
And he was shooting like 60% on them last year.
No, he's still a dead eye
Yeah.
from that range. Yeah, I'll give him credit for that for sure.
So it's just a name out there. I think the defense would struggle. I think you would need a small ball option to play in the playoffs with Aldridge on the team. But yeah, I think that's a guy that could sign. Any other bigs that I didn't mention that you have on your list?
Not really. Not really.
Okay, cool. Let's move on.
There's other names, but
let's talk about. Do you want to do guards or forwards next? The guards list is kind of depressing.
Let's do guards though, because
Okay.
I think in both circumstances, here's what's interesting about guards. Whether you keep DeAndre Ayton or not, the Suns need guards.
Yeah.
Like if you keep DeAndre Ayton, the Suns need guards. If you get Kevin Durant, the Suns need guards.
Well, I think
Campaign and Landry Shamet aren't going to cut it.
If you keep Ayton, you're using the taxpayer mid-level exception on a guard, right?
No doubt.
Yeah.
And if you get Durant, then I think your question is just I think no matter what, they're gonna have to be traded somewhere. So you're gonna try and pool some combination of Jay Crowder or Dario Saric or Landry Shamet and picks into a guard.
An offensive player, yeah.
Yeah, or you're going to do that move for the starting center who could theoretically replace DeAndre Ayton.
Yeah.
And then you use the
Ayton to get
mid-level
OG
exception.
Anunoby or something, yeah. yeah.
Right, and then you use the MLE to get a guard. But no matter what, in any circumstance, the Suns need a guard. I don't think they can just roll out Campaign and Landry Shamet again to start next season and hope for the best. So, yeah we definitely have to talk about it.
I'll let you go first here.
Well, I might be stealing your guy here, but as long as you mentioned PJ Tucker, this is kind of maybe I don't know. I'm undecided if this is just playing to the Suns like nostalgia.
I'm excited. Well, let's see. What do you got?
Well, let's talk about
Jamal
Ricky Rubio.
Crawford. Oh,
No,
okay,
not
sorry.
Jamal Crawford.
Okay.
I did not like Jamal Crawford as a Phoenix Sun. Let's talk about Ricky Rubio,
Yeah.
who tore his ACL. That's what it was, right?
Mhm,
ACL.
yeah.
Yeah, tore his ACL
About halfway through the season.
About halfway through the season. I think you're looking at a timeline of would not be able to return until January, February at best. So he would maybe but you could sign him to a contract. And you would probably get 25 to 30 games of regular season action out of him and then have him warm up and hopefully play a role in the playoffs. As a reminder, I mean, you watch more Cavs basketball than I did last season. Ricky Rubio, I wouldn't say he was as good as he was with the Suns a couple of years ago when he kind of helped transform the Suns culture from being a horrific team to solid basketball product for the first time. Like there's definitely a gap in what he is now versus what he was 2 years ago, but he was still, you can attest to this. He was still good. He still passes the fuck out of the basketball, right?
Yeah.
And so right there, the Suns need playmaking. They need more believe it or not, this team that continues to lead the NBA in assists per game and assist turnover ratio, none of that matters if Chris Paul's body falls apart. And again, I recognize that Ricky Rubio, if you signed him, you'd probably be rolling out Elfrid Payton or Landry Shamet or some other option at backup point guard for half the season. So is it an ideal scenario? No, not at all. But as a bench player, I think Rubio, who has continued to demonstrate that he can at least hit catch and shoot threes at a decent rate now, not at a great rate, but at an acceptable one, and who continues to be a terrific playmaker. As a bench player making $6 million, that makes a lot of sense. I have basically no doubt that he could run a more reliable offense than a Campaign as a bench guard.
Without a doubt, he was better than Cameron Payne last year. Without a doubt. And he also has the size to defend guys that just no other point guard on the Suns roster currently has, except for Elfrid Payton, who's not on the roster anymore. And obviously Elfrid Payton's not playing.
You know, I will say post ACL, that would be a thing to monitor. I mean, how old is Rubio now? Like 33?
30 something, yeah.
30, yeah, he would be
About
like
my
32,
age,
32, 33, something like that. And I will also point out, Rubio's never been a good finisher. Last season, his 2-point percentage declined to below 40% for the first time since he played with the Timberwolves several years back, because he came into the NBA. He was like a horrifically, historically awful finisher. He found a way to improve throughout his years in Utah and Phoenix, and then last year it went back down, which is, you know, kind of just that. it happens to a lot of point guards who hit the wrong side of 30. It's just like a telltale sign of, your athleticism is going. I think the difference with Rubio is that he's such a gifted playmaker, particularly in the way honestly, both in half court and transition. Suns fans know Ricky Rubio by now. I feel like I shouldn't have to sell you on his game too much. There are other intangible things that he brings to a basketball court that, maybe you wouldn't want him to be your starting point guard. But as a bench point guard, why not?
He'd be one of the best. He was one of the best last year.
Figured that was kind of an obvious name to throw out there.
The question is how much money.
How much money? And I think everyone's... I also think, actually, there's two things. So what's everyone's particular comfort level with what I suggested before, which is, are you going to let Cam Payne or Elfrid Payton run the show for half the season and then wait for Ruby to come back? That's one thing. And then also, Ricky might still not be too jazzed about the way things ended in Phoenix, where reportedly, I remember he said at one point that the Suns told him he wasn't being included in trade talks, and then he got traded. There might be some bad blood there that we don't know about. I don't think he's the type of personality to really air grievances out to the media, because he hasn't held a grudge publicly since then. But privately, he might be done with Phoenix for that reason. We have no idea.
I love it. I think it's a fascinating one. I think it's unlikely, though, for the reasons that you just mentioned. So we'll see what ends up happening there. He'd be fun. That'd be a really fun bench unit, especially if Dario Saric is back. You know, those two guys know each other, and it'd be pretty fascinating to watch them play together.
And Ricky knows he knows McHale, he knows Booker, he knows. Yeah. Did he play with Cam Johnson? Was that Cam Johnson's rookie year?
Yeah, and
Saric, he knows. He just knows a lot of the guys still on this basketball team. Mm-hmm. So the continuity, it would almost kind of just be, and he knows Monty, obviously. Yeah. The continuity would kind of still be there.
Yeah. But, I think the guys on the team still like him, and I think Monty's probably still a big fan. I'm going to throw a completely different name at you. Gary Payton II. Did you have Gary Payton II as one of the guys?
No, I did not actually.
Because it's not an offensive guy, right? And he's not going to fix any of the offensive problems. But the level of defense that he's capable of playing against star players is huge. He also is a guy willing to attack the basket, and he can get above the rim, which is kind of fascinating. And, the way that the Suns would employ him is, he doesn't do a lot on offense, but he's like a supercharged version of Javon Carter, in that he's insanely strong and insanely good at moving his feet. He's an older player, actually. He's getting close to 30 here. He's not, as far as a guy who's going to be on his first non-rookie scale contract, if you will. He was signed as an undrafted player. He's older. He had an interesting route to get to the NBA. And I just think he is the type of guy that would just dramatically improve their defense when they need a guy that can just guard someone that Chris Paul can't, ultimately. And I know that this is probably not an overly exciting one for a bench that was so bad offensively last year, but the Suns have have ways of improving the offense with trades, whereas Gary Payton II could do some pretty amazing things defensively for the Suns that they really, honestly, they don't really have guys that can do what he can do on defense.
They don't. Well, you said it right there. I think Golden State, the effect when Gary Payton finally came back from injury in the later rounds of the playoffs, it was instantly obvious. And he's improved enough throughout his career as a shooter and as a cutter, finding ways to somehow impact the offensive side of the ball, just a little bit. That the value, he's like there are players who are terrific defensive players, Matisse Thybulle, who just cannot do anything on the offensive side of the ball, and come playoff time, it's like, okay, you're a nice story. It's cool how you have historic steal and block rates, but are you really doing anything for us in a playoff series? And I think Gary Payton is the opposite side of that, where he successfully figured out how to squeeze out just enough out of his offense, where
he hit
he's
a few
not
threes,
just
right. Yeah, not a great three-point shooter, but he hit a few threes.
No, they've got to be wide open, but he shot, let me see what the totals is. He shot 53% from deep in the playoffs on 15 attempts. So 8 for 15, not a huge sample size, but when it mattered, he hit the shots, and that's really important. But I think you are absolutely right, for the record. They need to find more bench offense from somewhere else, and then if you want to go out and get a defensive specialist, that's fine. Yeah. But you can't neglect the offensive aspect of it, because if you do that, then you're left with Landry Shamet running your second unit offense all season long, which is a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah. So I'll throw it out there because I like it.
Yeah, I've got another name to throw out, and then maybe we can move on to forwards. This guy, arguably, he's so positionally versatile, he's a million things. But Victor Oladipo.
Oh.
Was he on your list?
He was not. I know the Heat have his bird rights. I just figured he was returning.
Point.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. And Heat culture and all that, and he may very well be interested in returning to the Heat. It's a good point.
I love that name, though.
Well, I just want to throw it out there because I think I've got a million names on this list, to be honest. Like, there's so many guys we're not going to have time to bring up today. But I think what differentiates Oladipo enough to be worthy of a mention, he's like the only free agent guard that I can think of who really puts pressure on the rim. And the thing about him is the finishing rate isn't good. Like, his finishing numbers, he shot 37% from the field, 27% from deep, 79% in the playoffs. He struggled. His whole thing this year was that the Heat were waiting for him to get healthy. He finally got healthy. He played like 10 games in the regular season. I don't know if you remember, but the very last game of the regular season, he dropped a 40-point, almost triple-double in the very last game of the regular season for the Heat, and then rolled into the playoffs, played a couple of decent series, and then completely fell apart in the Celtics series, did absolutely nothing for them in that 7-game loss against the Celtics. But I think the allure of Oladipo is that you have a guy who, and he demonstrated this multiple times in the playoffs, like, the lows are really low. The highs are you get a guy who once every couple of weeks gives you 25 and 5 and looks like a reserve all-star off the bench.
Yeah.
And his playmaking is significantly better still than most guys of his position. He's always attacking, so you know he's getting to the free throw line, and the free throw rate backs that up. But he does it in such a way where he's not a black hole because you know he has the playmaking as a tandem to it. So I think there's real value there. And you know, he's like, obviously doesn't even have maybe a modicum of the athleticism that he used to when he was an all-star in the first place with Indiana. And that's why it kind of sucks that his finishing numbers continue to slide, and he doesn't have the in-between game that you would like him to have, you know, like the mid-range shooting numbers. But those are all the reasons why you would get a guy like this for $6 million instead of $20 million in the first place.
Yeah.
It would be a gamble, but maybe high upside.
That's a pretty fascinating one. I like him as a player, and I think that he's one of those guys that has the ability of turning it on a little bit, turning back the clock, as people will say every time he does something good, because that's what happens with guys like that. And it's a fascinating one. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the Miami Heat. How about Tyus Jones? Do you have any thoughts on Tyus Jones?
Yeah, I love Tyus Jones. I actually covered him, I remember, in our free agent series a few years back when we were looking originally, when we ended up signing Ricky Rubio. I thought of him as a guy who could be a starter at that point. A low-end starter, but he's only continued to improve. His assist to turnover rate this year was, I think, 7 point something. Like, it was historic.
Incredible. Yeah.
I think he's at a minimum a full mid-level exception guy, and maybe if he gets lucky, could even be one of those guys who lands a contract. Like, I saw an idea, I forget who it was from to credit this idea, but I saw an idea from a Knicks fan today, or a Knicks beat reporter or writer of some sort.
If they miss out on Brunson.
who said basically they would prefer almost that the Knicks do not continue to make moves consolidating and creating cap space to chase Jalen Brunson, but would rather just get a guy who you know can run the show, basically a floor raiser like Tyus Jones for $10 or $12 million instead of chasing Brunson for 25. And to be honest, I like that idea a lot for the Knicks. So I think there could potentially be suitors out there who understand that Tyus Jones could be a low level, but a starting level point guard in the NBA.
I like him. I also think it's unlikely. I know that multiple people have asked me about him, so I wanted to make sure to mention him. I think he would be good. He's the type of guy that would just do Chris Paul things coming off the bench after Chris Paul comes out. And I just don't think he's really big enough to do a lot in the playoffs as far as defensively, which is kind of a problem, but still a good player. I'm going to just throw a name at you real quick, and then we can move on to wings. Patty Mills is a player option.
Oh, interesting. How much is it for?
$6.5 million or something
6.
like that.
5.
It's probably their taxpayer mid-level, but it's player option. And if that team is blowing up, he might not. He might not accept that player option. And if Patty Mills is available, that's an easy signing for the Sun. Do you just do that if you're able to get Kevin Durant? Obviously, you just do that immediately. I think Patty Mills is the type of player that if the Suns are not able to land a star player, then you're out on Patty Mills. He's going to a team that has a chance of winning a championship, a high chance, I should say, like a team with a top 5 player. And but yeah, I think that the Suns could land Patty Mills in that scenario.
I know
and
David would be happy.
I mean, it's a great situation. I think it's tough because, right, if you trade for Durant, say you trade what we talked about, you don't have a starting center. You're going to have to find a way to find a starting center using another trade. And because if you end up using the taxpayer mid-level exception on somebody like Patty Mills, which I think is worthwhile, it's just you're doing a lot of juggling there. And that's why GMs get paid a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And then, John Wall could be a free agent too. Not that I think he's going to end up on the Suns. He's apparently going to end up on the Clippers. I just wanted to mention him because multiple people have asked me about him today.
Wings?
Yeah, but let me tell you something I just saw in our Discord.
Oh, are we making this public? we're taking Discord secrets and leaking them now? Live?
The odds on DeAndre Ayton playing for the Brooklyn Nets in the last hour went from plus 4,000 to plus 350.
Okay. I mean, it's literally what you said at the beginning of the episode. It's Windhorse.
He's changing the odds. Yeah.
He did.
But it's there.
He put out the Phoenix Suns name because most bookies don't follow us on Twitter. If they did, then maybe they would have known all this time. But that's okay.
They just pay us to advertise.
It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, just for the record, the number 1 overall pick, Vegas knew first. Like that line changed before anyone else knew who was going. So things like that happen.
Well, plus 350, far from a done deal. But yeah, you're right.
That's pretty high odds. I mean, that's like, yeah. Anyway, Wings. This is a fascinating one because the Suns have a bunch of them right now. Yep. But, I mean, the trade packages for Kevin Durant have included, at times, both Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson. So the Suns could end up having a problem at wings, if you will, like a lack of wings. Well, I mean, they would still technically have on contract Jay Crowder and Torrey Craig if they trade both of those guys, who you can potentially start next to Kevin Durant and might be okay. But they could end up needing to find more starting quality wings if it comes down to it. I mean, I got one name I'm just going to mention, and I've been mentioning him for 2.5 years, but it's Nicholas Batum.
Yeah, I mean, just makes a ton of sense, does everything.
You're only going to take him from the Clippers if you have Durant, though, right? I just don't think that's
and
a guy you can get.
Even then, I'm not sure because Batum is interesting. I mean, he's been around the NBA forever, so he has a lot of connections too, right? I don't know if he has any connections to people in the Suns.
James Jones.
He played for Portland too.
Okay.
So
yeah,
and didn't Monty coach? I don't know, man. We'll have to look into it. But I've never noticed Nicholas Batum say anything about Suns organization people. But yeah, I mean, it's if you've got Kevin Durant, anything's possible. For sure.
Yeah. If Kevin Durant's on the Suns, Mikal Bridges is gone. Batum would be a nice replacement for him. Obviously, nowhere near as good, to be honest. But I mean, when you have Kevin Durant, I think Batum is an acceptable. It would be a great, honestly, starting small forward next to him. But yeah, who do you got?
Total positive. I'd be happy with that. I've got one guy who I don't even know what his value is. So I just wanted to bring him up because maybe you're going to tell him that this is asinine, that he would go for this little money and he would like obviously he's going to get more than this. But what do you think of Bruce Brown? Because I think maybe first of all, in that Nets sweep, like Bruce Brown was like their third best player.
He brought,
which I don't think people expected him to be.
He played a Draymond role.
Yes, and that's exactly where I was going with this. Of every single free agent available, the only player I can think of, one of the only players in the NBA who has logged like a significant amount of time, and by a significant amount of time I mean like over 100 minutes in his career at every single position. Not just he switches, switches 1 through 5 on defense. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
him. Yeah,
a guy who has literally played point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. He has literally played all 5 positions in his short NBA career. Bruce Brown. He has done that. And I think the thing with him is he's not like great at anything, at least on a normal day. Like he doesn't totally pop.
Yeah.
But his versatility is special. And is that worth $6 million, or
Yes.
is it worth $12 million,
well, yeah.
$15 million?
Fair,
You know what
okay,
I mean?
fair.
Like, I don't know what the market is for Bruce Brown, but I figured he was at least worth a mention because he's just like, he's fascinating.
There's such a lack of cap space that in order for him to make as much as you mentioned, it's either an MLE, and if the MLEs all dry up, then yeah, I don't think he's going to be able to make any more than 10. So that's a fascinating one. I didn't have him on the list because I just assumed exactly what you were thinking, but
Yeah,
those
that's
two
fair.
guys could start. I mean, for the Suns, depending on who the rest of the team is, and the Suns could be a contender. Batum and Bruce Brown. Kyle Anderson. What do you think of Kyle Anderson?
Not a shooter. That's the first thing I think of, to be honest.
But a great passer, right?
yeah,
and somebody who
he
plays
is.
multiple positions, can guard multiple positions. Kind of can shoot from the corners. Like he shoots. Has never really found a home. I think he would be a great player on the Suns. I think he would fit into their system. I think he's smart and can do a lot. And that's one guy that I would be all on board for. He can, first of all, he can run things in transition. He has the ability of running the offense as like a secondary or third ball handler if you need him to do that. Like you said, not a great shooter, but is long and tall and can guard multiple positions. And I just think he would be worth it at the taxpayer mid level.
Look, if I'm going to talk myself into Ricky Rubio as being enough of a shooter, then I guess Kyle Anderson is enough of a shooter. He's not awful. He's just not good. Yeah, I could see it. I could see it.
And what about Carmelo Anthony?
I wouldn't be a fan. For a veteran minimum, I guess it's fine.
I'm
don't
in
see
at
it.
a veteran minimum. I'm kind of in on Carmelo Anthony if that's what it's going to take.
What's he doing in Monty's offense? You know,
He's kind of. I think he would play like the Danilo Gallinari role.
Like double drag with Chris Paul and kind of pop out. Yeah,
pop out to the three. And look, it would be kind of fun to watch Chris Paul and Carmelo Anthony play off the bench. I've not been a big fan of Carmelo Anthony throughout his career. I think he's been kind of an overrated player, but I do think that he was pretty good with the Lakers as recently, and has just sort of changed the way he plays to fit into the right kind of roles. So as surprising as it might be to some people that have followed us for a long time, I don't think you would give him the taxpayer mid-level exception. But if you're in the running for ring chasers, which you would need Kevin Durant to be at this point, we realized last season when we thought the Suns could potentially get some, they got none. Yep. But if they do end up being in the running for some, I would not be against Carmelo Anthony as a bench piece.
Veteran minimum ring chaser, I could see it.
Yeah.
As long as we're talking about that, do you have any other mid-level candidates, or do you want to quickly? Do you have any ideas for like
minimums?
Who's your favorite minimum?
Yeah, I have a few, but let me just mention Otto Porter's a free agent.
Yeah, he's
Nemanja
on
Bjelica is
totally
a
on
free
my
agent,
list.
and I think both of those guys are good, and they're kind of the same kind of player, to be honest. And then these are all Warriors, but I have Juan Toscano Anderson as well, who's young enough, not young, but young enough that if you're getting him for cheap, I think that JTA would not be the worst kind of player, like in the Torrey Craig role, basically, as the fourth wing off the bench. So just wanted to mention those guys as well. Minimum guys, they're all old, right?
Well, for me, they're not. For you, maybe they are. So
well, I'll just mention them. I'll just read a few names and make it like a one sentence case for them. Austin Rivers is a minimum guy. Why? He's tall and can kind of play defense at the point guard position. Wesley Matthews, kind of the same thing for him. This one is kind of a joke, but I just put Lou Williams on there. He's old now. I think Lou Williams is probably done at this point.
I think he's done.
I don't think he could play in the playoffs, but maybe he's a guy, if you could get him at a minimum, that could just, allow Chris Paul to sit on the bench a little longer in some regular season games against the Magic or whatever. and he's able to dribble and create for other guys. And maybe that's okay on a team like the Suns. Avery Bradley, same case as Wesley Matthews, not very good anymore, probably done. And then I have Biyombo on here, which is kind of an obvious one, but
Biyombo most likely to be re-signed. He's there.
And then this is a guy I have no idea what he's going to sign for, but I put Malik Monk on here because, what is Malik Monk at this point? Is he a minimum guy or
no? I don't think he is, man. But that's interesting because I don't know where this came from. I just saw a tweet today, but it was from a established Lakers source that said in an interview with Malik Monk, he basically said he was willing to re-sign with the Lakers for less than he thinks he could get otherwise. Which is not something players usually say. It seems like he actually likes it there. I was going to say Malik Monk, I thought had a bit of a renaissance season. Interestingly enough, last year with the Lakers, the team was terrible, but Malik Monk was one of their only reliable forms of offense. And if you look at the numbers, he was actually pretty good. So he would be a guy I totally target.
Put him on there.
Were it not for him, I don't know if you can get him for a vet min.
I don't either. I don't know either. But yeah, you should try, especially if he's willing to sign for less for a contender. If the Suns end up being a contender. And then that's another guy where if the Suns are willing to go to be hard capped, maybe you would be willing to give him the biannual exception. He's young enough that you could sign him for multiple years and see what happens. But yeah, those are some minimum guys I listed. I'm sure you have some other guys. This is, there's a lot of guys that could sign for the minimum. What
I'll just throw out two names, and they're not super serious, but here's two more names, and then I think we can wrap up so we don't talk about literally everyone. Stanley Johnson. He's on my list again, man. Yeah. He was on my list last year. He's on my list this year. I think he came into the Lakers, and again, it's kind of funny how many Lakers players we're bringing up, given how horrible they were as an overall product. But Stanley Johnson, I think Lakers fans loved him. I don't know if you paid attention to what they said about him last year, but it's kind of exactly like I expected. Frank Vogel loved him too. He just plays with heart and hustle that not a lot of guys have, and he's really unique size-wise in that he's a 6'7" wing who's not actually too skinny to the point where he gets bullied by power forwards. So I think he's really unique in what you can do with him defensively. I will say, I remember when I made a video about him last year, I was betting on the fact, I was like, hey, he actually shot pretty well from the corners this previous season in Toronto. Maybe he can continue that positive momentum and actually prove that he's a shooter now. And he shot 30% on corner threes with the Lakers last year. So, he is what he is from an offensive standpoint. I think it's fair to say he's a negative, but I still like him. And then my last one, tell me what you think about this. James Jones doesn't use draft picks, right? My logic here is the typical age of, if James Jones were to use a draft pick, he would probably be taking someone who's 23, 24 years old anyway. So why not take a flyer on Jarrett Culver? How do you feel about that? 15th man. 15th man, totally veteran minimum.
Because absolutely. It's sort of the same case as Stanley Johnson that you made with Stanley Johnson last year, right? I mean, a little.
Yeah,
younger,
it is. Yeah, it is a little bit. I mean, I'll be honest. Stanley Johnson, I think when I was making a case for him last year, I think he had proved in Toronto and then again proved in LA that he had a tangible NBA skill.
Yeah,
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Jarrett Culver through 3 years in the NBA has been awful. He doesn't. Yeah. I don't think he has right now a bankable skill.
No, but because he's not good enough defensively to make up for his lack of offensive.
Right, but again, it's how are the Suns going to develop people eventually? If you're not interested in the 18-year-old projects, are you maybe interested in a 23-year-old project who you can't deny, Culver has playmaking chops and has a really unique, interesting NBA body, and if you can maybe just teach him to shoot, he could be a valuable Swiss Army knife type player. He could be a Kyle Anderson type player off your bench. And granted, what's your success rate of that actually happening at this point with a guy who's been awful through 3 seasons? I wouldn't give you too much of a shot. But again, it's a 15th man. Yeah. Who am I going to throw my last contract at? I would maybe rather have Jarrett Culver than Melo, but that maybe just speaks to my particular style of team building, because I do actually want to think about the future a little bit and just put their development to the test as an organization.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a fascinating one. I mean, you can make a similar case for Cam Reddish. That would have to be a trade. But that's somebody that just gets no playing time with the Knicks, and maybe the Suns would be willing to try him out. And I think Cam Reddish maybe has been slightly better than Jarrett Culver in the NBA. So that would have to be a trade once again. But yeah, that's a fascinating name. Let's see. I think that's all we got. Do you have any other person that you want to talk about? We talked about 20 players here, so
no,
maybe more.
I think we gave people enough names to chew on for the next 3 days, hopefully.
Yeah. I mean, we'll be back if anything else comes out before then, right? We have to be on call this week. This is kind of the week. Probably we'll be back. I mean, July 1st by nighttime. That's a Friday.
Whenever there's news, man.
So if we got to react to something, we could react. If something comes out about anything else, including Robert Sarver, we'll be available to talk about that too, because that should happen post finals. We're still waiting for that. And then, of course, if any big news about Durant comes out, we'll be back to talk about that as well. Probably, I don't know, we're probably going to just do extra podcasts this week on the main feed, and maybe not for the Patreon, but we also have a Discord. If you'd like to join our Discord, you can join our Patreon, patreon.com/thetimeline. It's going to be popping this week. There's going to be a lot of activity in there. I guarantee it. But this is going to be one of the, regardless of what happens, because a lot of this hinges on their number one overall pick that they took just a few years ago. This will be one of the more interesting weeks in the Phoenix Suns' recent history, and we will be here to talk about it. We appreciate you guys, and we'll be back very soon.
For over a century, Johnny Walker has shared its bold spirit with the game of golf. Now, crafted with Devereaux Golf, Johnny Walker introduces the Johnny Walker Blue Label-inspired Sunday Golf Bag, elevating the game with sleek design, Blue Label hues, and refined gold accents. Celebrate your hole-in-one with a premium Sunday bag crafted by Devereaux Golf. Submit proof of your achievement to johnnywalker.com/blue-in-1. Please drink responsibly.